Hey ladies! Alright, this video is for ladies or for gentlemen who want to help their ladies be healthy. This is about taking care of your hoo-ha and the difference between two of the most important challenges that women have on a general daily basis, and that is yeast infections versus BV, or bacterial vaginosis. Now in just a second we'll talk about those, the difference between them and why it's important to know one from the other. And I'm taking out all of my little products so I can show you what I have here in just a second. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to make sure that exciting, fun sex does not cause you infections later. Remember, when you get an infection, not only is it your problem to deal with because you're the one that's likely getting symptoms first, so you got to be proactive because the guy ain't going to do it for you. But also, if you do end up with something like a yeast infection or BV, your partner has to get treated too, and it just balloons into a big hassle. If you're like me, a lot of my young partners did not have very clean environments. They were new guys out in apartments, or maybe you're doing it somewhere where it's not terribly hygienic. I want you to think about just some simple ways to keep yourself healthy. Now here's to the big news that I can't believe I had to be in my 40s before any doctor finally told me that yeast infections are not the only things that make women itch. Everybody knows that a standard yeast infection product is something that you get at the store, teoconazole, mitraconazole or something, but we've seen it before. It's the Vagistat type yeast infection treatments, usually a little syringe like this, full of the cream, pre-filled. Now they have the little balls too, or beads that you can insert, and that yeast infection works on, treatment works on yeast infections. However, there's something else that women often get that most women don't recognize, and it's called BV, bacterial vaginosis. I have a page of notes to myself because no doctor ever sat me down and told me this stuff. I cobbled it together. Here's what I said to myself. Traditional yeast infections cause you to itch like crazy. They have the white discharge and sometimes the odor. Remember, you can get this externally too. So when I use certain medications, I will sometimes get a yeast infection around the clitoris. At that point, you have to take a pill. An internal cream isn't going to help an external yeast infection around the clitoris. So now I'm looking at diflucan, or what do they call it, fluconazole, from the pill from the pharmacist. When it's an internal yeast infection, you know it's that burning, terrible itch. Then you can use the cream or the pill, either way. However, BV is totally different. It's a bacterial-based condition. It's not a fungal condition. A yeast infection is a fungus. It's treated with the cream or the diflucan pill. BV is a bacterial-based condition. It's not touched by a yeast infection cream. So if you have an itch that won't go away and you try yeast infection cream and it doesn't go away in another 3 or 4 days, you might have BV. Listen to the symptoms. BV is totally different. The main thing to note is that it doesn't always cause itching, but it might. The discharge is never thick. It's a watery discharge. It doesn't have that white, thick, clumpy discharge, but the number one way you can tell is a really bad odor. It'll stick to your clothes. You'll notice it when you lean over to stretch. It'll be like this really strong smell that's very embarrassing. That, my friend, is BV. One of the main things we want to remember is that because yeast infections are caused by a fungus, that means that they can be caused or exacerbated by things like food. Remember, some people have candida issues. Well, candida is yeast. That means things like yeasted bread, sugars, the kind of things found in salad dressing. All of these kinds of foods can actually contribute to or cause a yeast infection. As I mentioned perhaps in other videos, for me, certain medicines that I take for my asthma tend to cause yeast infections. So we want to remember that the cause of a standard yeast infection usually has to do with getting something in the diet or inside the vaginal atmosphere that is not healthy or can kind of cause a little bit of friction or discomfort in the tissues. BV, or bacterial vaginosis, is a bacteria. That means you're typically going to see BV caused by a contaminant. So that would be things under the fingernails of your partner or yourself, dirt in the environment if you're having sex outside, chlorine can cause it if you choose to have sex in a pool, even for some women things like a vaginal sponge, which is kind of fallen out of repute but still can be used, or even some spermicides can cause BV because they can be like a bacteria or cause a bacteria to build up if you're using a spermicide with like a diaphragm. Remember, the diaphragm has to be held in place for hours after sex. Bacteria can build up in there if you've already had the introduction of something under the nails, on the hands, or in the environment that's not clean. So once again, yeast infections, they can be caused by friction, too much sex, but typically in the diet and using no lubricant during sex. BV typically caused by contaminants in the area, dirty hands, dirty environment, dirty sex toys, sponges that are used for sex protection or pregnancy prevention, etc. So just be aware that when you think about them, you want to realize they're caused by different things, and as a result, they will tend to spring up from different types of sexual activity. So once again, yeast infections are going to have a thick white discharge. BV is going to have a thin, watery, almost normal type discharge. Yeast infection is fungus-based, treated with one kind of product. BV is a bacterial-based, treated with another kind of product called metronidazole, which is a different kind of thing. You put it in an applicator, you have to use it for a few days. This one too has to be given to you by a doc. This is not over the counter. Metronidazole gel. I have 0.75% right here. The last thing to remember is that the strong smell is going to come with BV. Yeast infection typically has just a mild odor. BV is outrageous. You'll notice it immediately. So, ladies, I hope this has helped. It's really important to keep yourself clean during, before, and after sex. Don't let your partner touch you or get his fingers up inside without washing his hands first. Try not to have sex outside unless you have a place that you can really keep yourself clean and you can rinse off your hands and your personal parts after. I know I like to have outdoor sex and I'd like to be adventuresome, but I'm telling you, don't pay the price. Your guy's not going to pay the price. You shouldn't have to either. I hope you've enjoyed our time together today, ladies. Subscribe to my channel. Please share with a friend this important information about you and your body, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.